How's it going today, everyone? This is Mick. I'm back here to talk about an awesome VHS haul that I got at the flea market yesterday. So, I like to go to the flea markets almost every weekend. It's something my uncle and I used to do when he was living, and I still do it in honor of him just about every weekend. So, I came across a box just full of VHS, mostly wrestling stuff, a lot of just other older like Alfred Hitchcock stuff, and kind of like, I don't know, rarer stuff, it seemed like to me. So instead of just like picking and choosing the ones that I wanted, I just offered the guy something for the entire box and I bought the whole box. So right now, I'm going to show off the WWF Attitude Era VHS tapes that were in this collection. So I will work left to right, and I will begin with Royal Rumble 1998. So Royal Rumble 1998 took place January 18th, 1998, to a crowd of 18,542 people who attended live. So this was the 11th installment of the Royal Rumble, and it took place at the San Jose Arena in San Jose, California. Most notably, Stone Cold Steve Austin wins the Royal Rumble match for the second year in a row, making him the number one contender to the WWF Championship at WrestleMania. Also, a couple other things of notes from this show is Shawn Michaels with China versus The Undertaker. They had a casket match that was pretty enjoyable and memorable, I should say. Also, The Rock versus Ken Shamrock was a pretty good match. If I remember right, in this particular one, Ken Shamrock took a brutal chair shot to the head from The Rock, if I remember right. So the tape itself is in really nice condition. Can't ask for better as far as the actual tape jacket and all that stuff. Here's the back of it. So then up next was WrestleMania 14. Stone Cold versus Shawn Michaels. This was Shawn Michaels' last hurrah, pretty much. We also had Mike Tyson as the special enforcer of this match. Sorry for the glare that's inevitably going to be on each one of these. Kane versus Undertaker, classic. That may have been the very first time. Yep, their very first meeting right there. And this also continued with The Rock and Ken Shamrock with their classic feud they had. So WrestleMania 14 took place March 29th, 1998 at the Fleet Center in Boston, Massachusetts. I'm very honored to get this into my collection. By the way, I still have a few working VCRs that work excellent, so I buy tapes all the time still. Up next, I got King of the Ring 1998, which took place June 28th, 1998 at the Civic Center in Pittsburgh. 17,087 people were in attendance for this. I remember a First Blood match with Stone Cold versus Kane. That was kind of eh. You know, everybody knew Kane wasn't going to bleed first because Kane was covered head to toe in his body suit thing, except for his arm, and he was wearing the mask. So it's like everybody knew Stone Cold was going to bleed in that match. I also remember, and this is best remembered, for the absolutely brutal Hell in a Cell match featuring Mankind versus The Undertaker. That match is still talked about to this day. So quickly after the match begins, both Mankind and The Undertaker end up on the top of the cell, 16 feet high in the air. And they do battle up there for a little bit. And then The Undertaker just grabs Mankind and tosses him off the top of this structure 16 feet down onto the ground, where he landed on the announce table, totally obliterating the table and his body. So, after they scraped him up off of that, they try and wheel him back in a stretcher, and he didn't want to go out like that. So he got off that stretcher and limped his way back to that cage, climbed up to the top of it again, just to be choke slammed by the Undertaker through the top of the cage, down onto the wrestling mat, 16 feet down, on top of some steel chairs, in which he somehow lost his tooth through all of that, and it ended up sticking out of his nose. So that was a very, very memorable moment in pro wrestling, and it always will be, and it will always be one of the craziest moments in pro wrestling, in my opinion. Another notable thing that happened at this event was UFC great, the most dangerous man, Ken Shamrock, defeated The Rock to win the King of the Ring tournament. So that was a pretty good deal right there. The Rock and Ken Shamrock had a really good feud. Quick look at the back here, and I'll go down the match card here just to tell you guys what the matches were. So, of course, we had the Hell in a Cell match, Undertaker versus Mankind, the First Blood match, Stone Cold versus Kane with Paul Bearer. We had the semifinals of the King of the Ring, which was Ken Shamrock versus Double J, Jeff Jarrett. Also, Dan the Beast Severn versus The Rock. Plus the finals of the King of the Ring, which turned out to be Shamrock versus The Rock. Tag team title matches the tag team title match was the New Age Outlaws versus the NWA Tag Team Champions, the Midnight Express, Bodacious Bob and something Bart. I forget their names. It wasn't the true Midnight Express. Al Snow versus Head, or Al Snow and Head versus Too Much, with special referee Jerry the King Lawler. And it looks like also X-Pac with China versus Owen Hart, and the Headbangers and Taka Michinoku versus Kai and Tai with Yamaguchi-san. So, pretty good show. I thought all the matches were pretty solid on this one, to be honest. So next up, I picked up Fully Loaded 1998, which to me was just kind of like a B show, but still, it's awesome to have to my collection here. So this took place on July 26th, 1998, from the Selland Arena in Fresno, California. And this was to a crowd of 9,855 in attendance live. This was the very first ever fully loaded event for the WWF. So it looks like, let's see what the match card was for this one. Tag Team Championship match, Kane and Mankind, who are the champions, versus Stone Cold and The Undertaker. Skin to Win Bikini Contest, Jacqueline versus Sable. Intercontinental Championship match, 2 out of 3 falls, The Rock, who was the champion, versus Triple H. Hardcore stars on opposing teams, Scorpio and Farouk versus Terry Funk and Bradshaw. Maybe I'll go back and watch that match. I forgot about that one, kind of. 2 stars of entertainment collide. Val Venus versus Double J. Wow, that's going to be a 5-star match, isn't it? DX versus The Nation. Battle of the Bulls. Vader versus Mark Henry. Let me readjust this here for you guys so you can see the rest of this. Finally on this show, we had Ellering's actions result in war. LOD 2000, the Legion of Doom 2000, versus 8-Ball and Skull with Paul Ellering. And then we also had what they called the Dungeon Match. Ken Shamrock versus Owen Hart inside the infamous Hart Family Dungeon. Special referee Dan the Beast Severn. So from Fully Loaded 98, I will then go to SummerSlam 98. Highway to Hell was the tagline on this one. I'm thrilled with the condition of all of these too, man. These were very nice condition. Whoever was the owner took very nice care of them. So SummerSlam 98, Highway to Hell. This happened, when did this one take place? August 30th, 1998. This took place at Madison Square Garden in New York City. 21,588 people attended live. So things of note on this show is that Stone Cold beat The Undertaker. The Insane Clown Posse came out with the team The Oddities to sing them to the ring. They also had something called the Lion's Den match, which I liked. A lot of people don't. It's got like mixed opinions in the wrestling fandom, but I liked it. Ken Shamrock versus Owen Hart. And it took place in a separate location than the actual rest of the show did, which was kind of a cool thing, but probably a real pain in the butt to set up for the ring crew and the road crew and all that stuff. So the matches: Stone Cold versus The Undertaker for the championship. Intercontinental ladder match championship was The Rock versus Triple H. That was pretty good. Tag team championship, no holds barred and falls count anywhere. Mankind and Kane versus the New Age Outlaws. European championship, D'Lo Brown versus Val Venus. Sable and a mystery partner versus Jacqueline and Marvelous Mark Marrow. That was a skip through match, not because of Jackie and Marvelous Mark, but because of Sable, quite honestly, because she sucked. The Oddities featuring a live performance by the Insane Clown Posse versus Kai and Tai. The Lion's Den match, Ken Shamrock versus Owen. And a hair versus hair match, X-Pac versus Double J Jeff Jarrett, in which Double J lost and had to get his hair completely cut. They don't really do hair versus hair matches too often anymore. So moving on from SummerSlam 98 to Survivor Series 98, which was another really good one. And this also had another cool tag name or tagline for the show. So this was Survivor Series Deadly Game. And look at that badass cover to that, man. That was a cool entrance too, where the wrestlers came out at. Like, I remember this. This was a cool show. So this was the very first time in probably a decade, I think, that the WWF Championship was going to be decided in a tournament, crowned the champion at this show. So Survivor Series 1998 took place at the Kiel Center. 11/15/1998, St. Louis, Missouri. 21,179 people were live in attendance. As I said, the first time in a decade they crowned a new champion via tournament. Other major point in this show, I would say, is The Rock turning heel and joining up with Mr. McMahon to win the belt. This particular show had a really cool theme song to it as well. I remember it distinctly. So the match card for this one was the Deadly Game Tournament, which featured Mankind, Mystery Opponent, Al Snow, Jeff Jarrett, Kane, Stone Cold Steve Austin, The Big Boss Man, X-Pac, Undertaker, Steven Regal, Ken Shamrock, Goldust, The Rock, and Triple H. As well as the Deadly Game Tournament, we had the Women's Championship match, which was Jacqueline versus Sable. Jacqueline was awesome, man. I can't say enough about her career. She was an awesome, awesome wrestler. We also had the Triple Threat Tag Team title match. The New Age Outlaws versus the Headbangers versus D'Lo Brown and Mark Henry, which, if I remember right, was probably a good match for what it was. So next up, that would be my final one from 1998. Now I'm going to move into a couple that I picked up from 1999. The first being King of the Ring, 1999. So this took place June 27th of 99 at the Greensboro Coliseum. 20,108 attended live. So the matches of note were Vince McMahon and son Shane versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, and I believe that was for control of the WWF at that time. So other match of note was the Hardy Boys, Matt and Jeff, versus the Brood, which was Edge and Christian at that time. Also, the finals of the King of the Ring this year were determined at this show, and it was badass Billy Gunn that won the King of the Ring tournament. So there was some pretty interesting stuff going on in the WWF at this point. I believe The Undertaker was doing his Ministry of Darkness at this point, or just about to do the ministry. I'm pretty sure it was already going, though. Other matches on this: Hardcore Holly versus X-Pac. The Big Show versus Kane. Oh, these were the King of the Ring matches, but I'm just going to read them off anyway. Mr. Ass, which is Billy Gunn, versus Ken Shamrock. And I still can't believe they had him win this, but I like Billy. Road Dogg versus China. So, pretty good show, all things considered. So at this point in the wrestling world, WCW World Championship Wrestling was still around and in full gear, and they could have been even beating WWF at this point. I don't remember quite if WCW was still beating them or if WWF had finally overtaken them. But be that as it may, the next one I picked up is Unforgiven, 1999. Cool album. Cool tape artwork there, or cover or whatnot. I like the fact that they gave the British Bulldog right there one last championship match before he left the company for the big championship. So this event took place on September 26th, 1999 at the Charlotte Coliseum, Charlotte, North Carolina. 15,779 were in attendance. Notable matches besides the championship match was the Dog Kennel from Hell Hardcore Championship match featuring Al Snow versus the Big Boss Man. And that match was a clusterfuck. Cool match in concept, but it didn't turn out that way. The match was like surrounded by all these like vicious, mean dogs. And instead of the dogs being vicious and mean, they were like humping each other and shitting and pissing all over the place. So it was lesson learned on the Dog Kennel from Hell match. Another notable match in this show was X-Pac versus Chris Jericho, in my opinion. They are just starting to warm up Chris Jericho, and he's about to go on a major, major run on his way to being built up as an eventual undisputed champion down the line here. Matches on Unforgiven 99 were as follows: the six-pack challenge. The Rock versus Mankind versus British Bulldog versus Kane versus Big Show versus Triple H. Intercontinental Championship match, Jeff Jarrett versus China. There's a little bit of history to that match right there, the backstory and stuff like that. Women's Championship match, Ivory versus Luna. Luna Vachon is one of the greatest female wrestlers in the history of wrestling. European Championship match, Mark Henry versus D'Lo. The Dog Kennel from Hell Hardcore Championship match, Al Snow versus Big Boss Man. And then we had the New Age Outlaws versus Edge and Christian. That was a good tag team championship match. X-Pac versus Jericho with Curtis Hughes, a.k.a. Mr. Hughes. Val Venus versus Steve Blackman. And the Acolytes versus the Dudley Boys. Pretty solid show. So that would be the end of the 1999 tapes that I had in this haul that I bought. So now we're going to start off with the year 2000. And by this point, WWF was way ahead of the WCW and never looked back. And they applied major, major pressure And they were trying to put them out of business, and they did just that eventually. WWE got even more raunchy, even more edgy, even more of the stuff everybody loved by this point. This particular show even had some nudity on it. So, Royal Rumble 2000. This took place January 23rd, 2000, Madison Square Garden, New York City. 19,231 attended live. Let's see what we have for the match card here on the back. Tables, chairs, bikinis, and mayhem says it all. So we had the street fight for the WWF Championship. Triple H, champion, versus Cactus Jack. The 30-man over-the-top rope battle royal to determine the number one contender for the WWE Championship at WrestleMania 2000. Triple threat intercontinental title match. Chris Jericho and Chyna were the co-champions. So it was Jericho versus Chyna versus Hardcore Holly. Next, we had the first ever tag team tables match. The Hardy Boys versus the Dudley Boys, and that was a classic. Next, we had the Miss Rumble swimsuit competition. We also had the debut of Taz in a WWF ring versus Kurt Angle, and I remember his ovation was thunderous, man. The fans already knew he was going to debut, and he got one of the loudest ovations I ever heard in WWF. So the next up was the Tag Team Championship match with the New Age Outlaws, who were the champions, versus the Acolytes. Pretty good, very memorable show for more than one reason. Anyone who's seen this knows why. So, yeah, cool show. Glad to have it in the collection. Next one I have here is No Way Out 2000. This was an awesome show in my opinion. This took place February 27th of 2000 from the Hartford Civic Center in Hartford, Connecticut to a crowd of 12,551. So this event was during one of Triple H's reigns at the top as WWF champion. So the main event was a nice Hell in a Cell match. Triple H with Stephanie McMahon Helmsley versus Cactus Jack. So then we also had a WrestleMania qualifying match. Big Show versus The Rock. And I believe that was a qualifying match to get into the championship match or something like that. I don't quite remember. 6-man tag match was Too Cool and Rikishi Fatu versus Perry Saturn, Chris Benoit, and Dean Malenko with Eddie Guerrero, also known as the Radicals. The WWF Intercontinental title match, Chris Jericho versus Kurt Angle, a true classic there. The WWF Tag Team title match, the Dudley Boys versus the New Age Outlaws. Tag Team number one contender match, Edge and Christian versus the Hardy Boys with Terry. This show is chocked full of good matches. Special challenge match, Sexual Chocolate, Mark Henry versus Viscera. No Holds Barred match, X-Pac with Tori versus Kane. And then finally, it looks like we had Taz versus the Big Boss Man with Prince Albert. WrestleMania 2000. This took place April 2nd, 2000 at the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim, California to a crowd of 19,776 live. So there was some good matches on this show as well. I always go to the triple threat IC match between Chris Benoit, Kurt Angle, and Chris Jericho because that was a pretty cool match. And I think it was actually for the IC title and the European title, if I remember right. I think it was like a 2 out of 3 falls or something like that. This show also had the Dudley Boys versus Edge and Christian versus the Hardy Boys, which was another excellent classic. Main event of this WrestleMania, was a fatal four-way elimination match with a McMahon in every corner. How can this possibly go wrong? So we had Triple H with his wife Stephanie versus The Big Show with Shane McMahon in his corner versus Cactus Jack with Linda McMahon in his corner. And we had The Rock with Vince McMahon in his corner. And if anybody is a fan and have seen this, you know how it ends. The dastardly Vince McMahon turns on The Rock. So here's how the matches broke down. We had the first ever Fatal 4-Way elimination match for the WWF Championship, a McMahon in every corner. As I already said, Triple H versus Big Show versus Rock versus Mick Foley, a.k.a. Cactus Jack, a.k.a. Mankind, a.k.a. Dude Love. So then we had another first ever, two-fall triple threat match for the Intercontinental and European Championship. Kurt Angle, champion, versus Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit. A absolute classic. Triangle ladder match for the Tag Team Championship. Dudley Boys, who are the champions, versus the Hardys versus Edge and Christian. First ever 13-man hardcore battle royal for the hardcore title. Cat fight. The Cat with Mae Young versus Terry with the Fabulous Moolah with special guest referee Val Venus. So it looks like we also had Kane and Rikishi versus X-Pac with Tori and Road Dogg. TNA, which was Test and Albert with Trish Stratus versus Al Snow and Steve Blackman. And then we also had a 6-person tag match. Too Cool and China versus Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko, and Perry Saturn, also known as the Radicals. Looks like we also had The Godfather and D'Lo Brown versus Big Boss Man and Bull Buchanan. Next up, I had WWF Insurrection in this collection I bought. This was a UK event, never seen in the US until they released it on tape, I suppose. This is one that also contains nudity. London Bridge isn't the only thing falling down. So this took place May 6th, 2000, Earl's Court Exhibition Centre, London, England. 17,000 attended live for this show. The triple threat main event was a WWF Championship match. The Rock, who was the champion, versus Triple H versus Shane McMahon. WWF European Championship match. Eddie Guerrero champion versus Chris Jericho. That was classic. WWF Tag Team Championship match. Edge and Christian champions versus the Hardy Boys. Man, this is 3 for 3 so far in good matches. WWF Hardcore Championship match. Crash Holly champion versus the British Bulldog. That's probably good in its own right, too. Another Benoit versus Angle classic. Too Cool versus Perry Saturn and Dean Malenko. Kane versus Bull Buchanan. Road Dogg versus Bradshaw. An arm wrestling match with the Cat versus Terry. Rikishi and Shokishi versus the Dudley Boys. So the show is a mixed bag, but mostly pretty good in my opinion. Judgment Day 2000, Undertaker returns. This took place May 21st, 2000 at Freedom Hall in Louisville, Kentucky. 16,827 live in attendance. Matches of note, in my opinion, anytime I see a Benoit match, it's a match of note. That's my opinion. So we had Chris Benoit versus Chris Jericho for the IC title. We also had Eddie Guerrero versus Dean Malenko versus Perry Saturn for the European Championship. So those are 2 notable matches in my opinion. Let's see what else was on the card. So the main event was a 60-minute Iron Man match for the WWF Championship. Shawn Michaels as the special guest referee, and it was The Rock versus Triple H. The match was all right. It wasn't one of my favorites, though. There's also a no-holds-barred match, Falls Count Anywhere. Shane McMahon versus The Big Show. tag team table match, Road Dogg and X-Pac with Tori versus the Dudley Boys. Submission match for the WWF Intercontinental Champion, which is the one I was talking about, Chris Jericho versus Chris Benoit. Rikishi and Too Cool versus Edge, Christian, and Kurt Angle. That was some funny stuff, man. If anybody remembers watching wrestling during this time and seeing Edge and Christian and Kurt Angle together, man, they made some good magic together on camera. Both in the ring and the skits that they did backstage and stuff like that. So we also had that triple threat match I was telling you about, the WWF European title match, Eddie Guerrero with Chyna versus Dean Malenko versus Perry Saturn. So pretty solid show, I would say. So this would be the last actual like pay-per-view event show VHS that I got in this collection, and it has some awesome artwork on this one. Cool show. Armageddon 2000. This took place December 10th, 2000. Birmingham Civic Center, Birmingham, Alabama. 14,920 people in attendance. So this was definitely continuing Chris Jericho's push, making him an upper echelon wrestler, getting him prepared for the big belt eventually. So we also had Chris Benoit versus Billy Gunn for the IC Championship. We also had a 6-man Armageddon Hell in a Cell match for the WWF Championship at this show. The matches were the 6-man Hell in a Cell for the WWF Championship. We had Kurt Angle versus The Rock versus Stone Cold Steve Austin versus The Undertaker versus Rikishi versus Triple H. So next up, we had the WWF Four Corners Tag Team Championship match. Edge and Christian versus Bull Buchanan and the Good Father versus the Dudleys versus Road Dogg and K-Quick, also known as Ron the Truth Killings, also known as R-Truth. We also had the WWF Intercontinental Championship match. The one, Billy Gunn versus Chris Benoit. I believe Benoit won this one. He should have. If he didn't, I'm almost certain he did. It's been a while since I've seen it. WWF Intergender Elimination Tag Team match. Dean Malenko, Perry Saturn, and Eddie Guerrero versus the Hardy Boys and Lita. WWF Triple Threat Women's Championship. Ivory versus Molly Holly versus Trish Stratus. That was a good match. I do remember that one. WWF European Championship. William Regal versus Hardcore Holly. And it looks like we had Chyna versus Val Venus in a WWF Last Man Standing match, Chris Jericho versus Kane. So along with all of those VHS, I also picked up these random VHS that were in the box. And these are just specialized tapes on different wrestlers. That was a cool one right there because that was just random, that Ric Flair one. That's the only WCW one that was in the box, unfortunately. But we got the Rock's tape there, Ric Flair. There's a Best of Raw Volume 2. The D-Generation X tape. Austin 316. Triple H The Game. As well as Break the Walls Down, the Chris Jericho tape. So what a hell of a find this was at the flea market. Pro wrestling is a passion and a love of mine. I will never ever apologize for that. So if you enjoyed taking a bit of time on this video, actually a lot of time, this was a long video, give it a thumbs up for me. See you later. Thank you for watching.